Hello, everybody, and welcome to this special panel called Loving Our Communities, Trans, Non-Binary, and Two-Spirit Voices in Community Building here in the Central Valley. I am so happy to have this panel and this representation here on the traditional territories of the Mono and the Yokoots peoples. We have an amazing panel of community builders, activists, resistance, and so forth. So I would like to first introduce our panelists, and then we'll open up to the floor where I have some questions for all of you around community building. The first person that I'm proud to introduce to this panel is Xico Garza. Xico is a student of the lineage under Maestra Maquil Xochitl from Sacramento, California since 1994. Currently, Xico is teaching basic danza azteca, drumming, regalia, and ceremonia to his pupils in Visalia, California for the past 8 years. Xico has had the blessing of performing for the following presentations, including the Goldman Environmental Awards San Francisco Opera House, Burning Man Temple Blessing since 2014, Rick Owens Men's Tech Waddell Fashion Week Paris, France 2019, Microsoft LGBTQ Commercial 2020, Hollywood Forever Dia de los Muertos since 2017, performed for many SGI USA Buddhist events. Xavier Xico studied culinary at San Francisco City College and resides in the Sequoia National Monument, Springville, California, with his partner. They live in a farm-like environment surrounded in a sanctuary next to the Tule River on their land. They have beautiful photos on their Facebook, just FYI. He currently serves under the NGO Wild Places as a cultural advisor. Thank you so much, Xico, for being here. The next person I'd like to introduce is Rosio Léon Velasco-Stoll. Rosio has many accomplishments under her name. She is the founder and president of the Fresno Spectrum Center and the Pride Panthers Coalition. She is the chapter leader of the LGBT Pink Panthers movement of Fresno since 2013. She is one of 8 California transgender advisory panelists to the Lieutenant Governor Eleni Kounalakis since 2021. She is a LGBT cultural training facilitator to Fresno PD. She is also a volunteer member of the Imperial Dove Court and does amazing performances there. She also volunteers for LGBT Fresno since 2013. She is also a supporter of West Cares The Living Room since 2019 and the Fresno Rainbow Pride Parade since 2020. On our right, we have Andrew Bligh. Andrew is a past committee member of Trans Emotion for Transgender Day of Remembrance and Transgender Day of Disability. He is also the past president of United Student Pride at Fresno State, which is very exciting. He is also an instructor of English at the College of the Sequoias. Next to Andrew, we have Jess Fitzpatrick. Jess Fitzpatrick is a queer trans man in Fresno born. His activism started in his early 20s, volunteering at the Real Pride Film Festival and an organizer with Equality California's attempt to stop Prop 8 from going to the ballot. He started to come out as transgender in 2011 with the help of his partner and the support groups of Trans Emotion. He then volunteered for 4 years and was the co-chair with Trans Emotion for 3 years. Jess now works at the Fresno EOC LGBTQ+ Resource Center as a community outreach educator and unofficial gender-affirming resource manager, or tranager, providing workplace competence presentations and helping other gender-expansive folks connect to local resources. He also created and runs the Trans Medical Needs Fund through the Resource Center. He lives in tower with his partner of 11 years with 3 very spoiled fur kids. Last but not least is Zayn Anthony. Zayn Anthony is a strong community activist serving the LGBT transgender community. He volunteers his time and talents with many nonprofit organizations. Zayn currently serves as the president of Trans Emotion and the Imperial Crown Prince Royal of the 49th reign with the Imperial Dove Court de Fresno. Thank you, panelists, for joining us here. So I would like to first kind of start with asking each one of you a question around your story of community building. And I want to first start off with Xico about sharing your story, how you've grown into a spiritual leader and community builder, especially for our queer indigenous community and two-spirit community.
Thank you so much. Can we use this?
Mhm.
Well, I wanted first to acknowledge this panel, five people, and have the opportunity to work with other LGBT and acknowledge this land that we are in, the Yucatan land. This is the first peoples that are residing here, and so we want to acknowledge that. And my name is Xico, and I live in Sequoia National Monument in the Sierras, and I basically lived in San Francisco for 30 years, and I'm an HIV survivor, and I am a single father, and I've raised 3 daughters on my own. And my father was one of the first cases who died of AIDS, and I had like 76 friends of mine died of AIDS in San Francisco. So I was there the whole time during the epidemic when it was just people were dying left and right from the AIDS. So I came to this county thinking that I was going to get away from the hedonism of San Francisco, particularly with a lot of crystal meth addiction in San Francisco and how it was socially accepted. And I came here and then I realized there was more crystal meth here than it is in San Francisco. So I felt like I needed to find a niche, to really find a niche. Why am I here? We had acquired land at Springfield, California, 12 acres there. And through the evolution of really looking at my life and the purpose, after living in San Francisco for 30 years, just really looking at myself deeply and saying, what is my purpose in life? What am I doing here in Central California? And, through my spiritual connectedness to nature and my awareness that there's a universe out there. There's a vast universe, then I needed to create a narrative of creating value with my purpose in life in this planet while I'm here. So I was in the Sweat Lodge, which is a spiritual structure that we do prayers and we sing native songs. And my maestra, who came from Mexico, was teaching me about plant medicine and the teachings of the mythology and philosophy of our ancestors. And as she was telling me all these beautiful things and just like this awareness of like planting trees, planting flowers, connecting to nature ethics, and my partner who taught me about the importance of queers connecting to nature and how some of the things that we would go to the environmental work, there was no queers there. We realized that a lot of queers are actually not really plugged into the nature ethics or the movement. And so with that notion, we decided that we create our 12 acres land we converted it into a spiritual ceremony land. And through that process, when I was in there with my maestro at the ceremony, I realized, I had a realization, I was like, I would like for all queer people, two-spirit people, to hear this teaching, to understand these teachings about what it is, the Sweat Lodge, and the medicinal plant medicine, the indigenous ways, the mythology, the Mexica, the Aztec, the Yokan people. And I had this realization, so we decided that I wanted to have a two-spirit ceremony. And in that process, I decided that, yes, I have to create a ceremony that has a safe place for indigenous people of color, to be able to come and connect to the river. The land has a Tule River, and so it crosses our land, and to the stars, to the nature ethics, to the plants, to the insects, everything that was around there. And so I came up with the idea of creating a two-spirit ceremony. And immediately that just felt like this excitement, like this creation of value, creation of like, I want to impact young people. I want to impact people who are in need, who are depressed, who have addiction problems, who have needs. And having the ceremony, we could open up this kind of like chakra, like to really help people understand that they have the capacity to transform their lives through nature ethics. So I created this two-spirit ceremony in 2017, and I went to San Jose to propagate it, to tell people about the ceremony that I was that I was going to do. And I took little flyers, they were about this size, and I was so excited, and I went up to an elder, an indigenous elder, and I asked, said, hey, would you like to come to our ceremony, or do you know anybody in your community who could use this ceremony? And she looked at me, and she went back like that, and she's like, I had some kind of disease, and she said, we don't accept Two-Spirit people in our ceremonies. And I was just like, oh my God, I couldn't believe that this kind of like homophobic person was really like against that whole notion. Anyway, to make a long story short, at the end of the ceremony, they gave me palabra, which means you get to speak. And I spoke about, asking people to come to the ceremony. And there was a lot of young people, families, and all kinds of young people. And she took the mic and she started to say that gay people are, pedophiles. And she, and people heard it all the way across the parking. And she just attacked me, about, not. She also said that I should not be allowed to have this ceremony. Anyway, fast forward, I was so hurt, I was so pained. I think I cried so much. And then I got to Springville and I listened to NPR, and what really provoked my determination and my vow to create this ceremony was that the case of Gabriel Fernandez, the little boy who was murdered. And I must have sobbed in my car for hours thinking, I wish I hadn't been that boy, and take that pain away from that child. So that made me stronger determination that no child should ever be murdered or hurt or abused because their parents thought he was gay. The parents thought that their boy was going to be queer, and so he was one of the just really horrific things. So out of this trauma, out of this experience that I made that determination, I made that vow that this ceremony must go on. And now we're in our 7th year that we've had the ceremony. We have a lot of families who come with Two-Spirit children. We have a lot of families that come to our ceremony that have brought their teenagers who have been depressed, and now they can go to a place where they feel safe, and they can go down to the river, they can see the stars, they can hear the insects and the winds and the elements of life, and create value from their life. So that was my experience from pain and sorrow, and from the determination in the ceremony to create something of value. Thank you for that question.
Thank you. I'm going to ask the same question to Rosio. Share with us your journey of becoming an activist and advocate and community builder for our trans and gender expansive community.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me here. I really appreciate the time that I can help in sharing my story. It wasn't really fast knowing, what I wanted to do. I actually did not know I was transgender fully to accept myself. It happened in stages, but it was through trauma that I suffered as an adolescent. Since I was a kid, about 6, 7 years old, I was already dabbling in makeup and trying to wear mom's shoes and her dress, like any curious, queer kid. And I was oppressed for it. I was beaten and spanked, and whenever I did it. So I knew I had to hold that inside. I could not, share that. That was when I was a little kid. In my teen years, because my home was a broken home, I had a stepfather, and a Mexican stepfather. And when I say that, people are like, "Whoa!" Very machismo. I suffered a lot of trauma. My mom suffered horribly as domestic violence victim through my teen years, and that was just the perception of me being gay. I hadn't even known yet. So I went through life, in and out of the closet, in and out, in and out. The life-changing moment was, I remember what year it was when Ellen DeGeneres came out. That's all my pinpoint is, when Ellen DeGeneres came out on TV. I had sat down my grandma and my mom, and I told them, look, this particular show has a meaning to you that I cannot express verbally. So when she said it, the TV got turned off. My mom went one direction, and my grandma just stayed, sitting there just stunned. It took a while for my family to come around after the notion was already made. Gay, right? And I was bullied a lot, of course, trying to find myself throughout my teen years, and I, went through much of my young adulthood like that. I did go through a lot of spiraling down with alcohol and drugs, trying to self-medicate, and then I started doing a little bit of drag here, a little bit of drag there, and that was my outlet, if you will, to be my trans self without really saying it. So I use that a lot, doing drag and performing, which, as you know, performed my art for drag. Later on, I did find out that there was a lot of things that needed to be changed in our community. When Prop 8 was coming out, I did help out trying to get marriage equality for us. Green as a novice, I didn't know what I was doing, but I was out there at Targets, at Walmarts with the LGBT Fresno and Zoyer, Zindel, Jason Scott, us three. We kind of pushed it out there. And both of those guys are actually the ones that got me started questioning myself. If I'm trans, if I'm not, am I queer? Life's a big revolving door. You never know what you're going to get from one month to the next. So Zoyer invited me to Transmotion, and where I started hanging out with a lot of the Transmotion folks, and I started questioning myself. Am I a candidate for being a trans woman? Can I actually safely come out and be a trans woman? As I was going back and forth with that, I saw a lot of things that were happening in our community that really needed unification to combat. Once we got our marriage equality, a lot of trauma and violence was heading our way. So I started the chapter here for the LGBT Pink Panthers movement, which is a national order to protect our community. And we'd go out and just walk the streets, trying to protect those who might be falling victim to violence. And as I was doing that, I started, questioning myself even more until I found my husband now, but boyfriend then. And he kind of helped me kind of guide me. Because again, that uncertainty with all our community members, needing services and stuff, I started looking back at my past, at how I could help, as well as develop myself to be a good community leader. And that's when I found out I can help by being a voice for the voiceless, is what I say. I connect individuals, especially the youth, or parents that are going through troubles with our youth through the schools for being bullied or victimized in some way or another. I get them connected to services. Sometimes EOC, because sometimes they've got services that I just don't have at my office. But I just wanted to be the best community leader as I could. And so doing that, the Prop 8, and trying to get the ball rolling on us to be unified. And that's when I came up with the Pride Panthers Coalition, so that local organizations and I could work together and see what services our community needs and work on developing programs or activities that are needed for our community. So it kind of snowballed, I guess you could say, from one thing to the next and it just got to the point where I'm now the biggest voice ever for our Central Valley as the representative for us through the state of California's Transgender Advisory Panel to the Lieutenant Governor. And I've been able to help with some of the bills, the assembly bills that have gone past with my stories. And also my adopted son's story too, because he's trans. So we're like what we call one big trans family, almost like the Fabulous Five.
I love that.
Yeah, and that's how we got started into being a community leader for all.
Thank you so much. What a beautiful, hard, but also very important story. Thank you for sharing that. I'd like to go to Andrew.
Hi,
Hi, Andrew.
how are you?
Good. As an ally and early organizer for Trans Emotion, I would really love to hear from you how you got involved in the early days of Trans Emotion and what motivated you to work with trans communities.
Well, I started working with Trans Emotion. To be honest, I don't remember the exact year. I met a dear friend, Blue Riggs, which many people know around here. And he was the founder of Trans Emotion. I got to that's how I first really got connected. My first connection really to the trans emotion, or excuse me, the transgender community. I took a class actually, it was ambiguously titled Sexuality in Literature at Fresno State. John Biden taught it.
That's how we get you.
And now, and one of the books that we read was Stonebridge Blues, and that book just, I don't know what it was about it. I mean, I identify as cis, but at the same time, that book, the story was galvanizing. It was really powerful, and I read it in maybe a couple of days. I don't think I left my bed reading the book, and it's beautiful and brutal at the same time. It was a very difficult story to read, but it was, I don't know, I just started thinking, well, if, Feinberg can do living after all this, what's my excuse? So let's go out and do something instead. And that kind of got me moving, and then I shot out an email out of nowhere to transgender warrior at earthlink.net. And I got a response back, and it was like a good paragraph too. And I don't know, I thought that was really my first real connection with the trans community, was through reading, I guess. And I got to be part of planning the event along with Robin McGeehee, Diana Bone of the GSN Network, among many others who were, you need some money for an honorarium, so, there was that. But had that at Fresno State, and they had an event for CCA, which was an organization called Central California Alliance, and they were really great for funding and dinner banquets and stuff like that, and that kind of thing. And I got to meet one of my heroes. I like when people get to meet their heroes, and I got to meet one of mine, and it was a huge experience. It's a surreal experience to be talking about the Iraq War with Leslie Feinberg at a dinner table. And that was what I liked about Feinberg, was he was really connected to so many different issues besides the trans community. Was very connected to championing those who are oppressed and helping others, from workers' rights to the war in Iraq, to you name it, that kind of thing. And then I kind of often went to graduate school in Riverside, oddly enough, where John Biden went to go to graduate school as well. And as the product of a lot of these things, I kind of became more like, I went to a private Christian school for a lot of years, and I felt really isolated, and it was really like sort of thought police, and I did for me. So I sought, through connecting through literature and through people, some element of sense of purpose in life, I guess. And so learning from other people and talking with other people is about enlarging my experience and connecting to something bigger than myself, so to speak, I guess. And, becoming more part of the trans community was also part of that. It was just more total different types of experiences and that kind of thing. And I was president of the United Student Pride for a year. That was a lot. And that was what I did. And we did a journal reading with Lillian Faderman, which was really, really great. And if you haven't checked her out, you should by now. She's amazing. I'm not trying to remember exactly when I met up with Blue, but I don't know, I just started getting involved. And I met Zoyer in 2006 when he was still a student and Kiki was still president of Diversity Club. and we just started just kind of hit it off and hung out a lot, along with actually doing actual work. It was kind of, for those who don't know or don't remember, but hanging out with Zoria was always kind of like this peripatetic journey of hanging out but also doing work. And that's what we did a lot of. So we did Transgender Day of Remembrance. So we didn't have, it was like 4 people doing all the work for the most part. And it was mostly just 4 people, and kind of in general be like these small little meetings, and in AJ and Becky's, I hope I can say their names, I don't know, apartment, and another couple other places too. And most of it was just raising funds. So we do all this stuff you do where you do beer busts and drag shows and stuff like that to raise money for, just so we could have this event and stuff like that. And it's grown to become doing Trans Community Day of Visibility too later on, which is really great. I got to be, I don't know, the champion for the talent, I guess, a couple of times. I guess the person who tries to calm down the talent, I don't know, and keep people going, like, you're on next. I liked that. I don't know, and I've made lots of friends, and I mean, it's a personal connection, because the transgender community's taught me so much, but also I've had the opportunity to grow so much and make a lot of new friends, and I want to protect my friends first and foremost, and that's has a lot to do with it.
Thank you so much. So I'd like to go to Zayn and ask the same question from you about your journey as an activist and advocate for our trans and non-binary gender expansive community.
All right, thank you for having me. Yeah. My name is Zayn Anthony. I'm the current chair of Trans Emotion here in Fresno. So my kind of journey was, it was really personal to me inside, because I'm the only one who knew how I felt, no matter who told me like it was wrong to do this or wear this or cut your hair. And so I kind of was more enclosed, growing up. But the community helped me evolve with that and kind of express myself more. And it was at my first drag show at the North Tower Circle. Drag, it was put on by the Fresno Presbyans, and it was a drag king show. So usually you hear of like drag queens, and the kings, they're coming up more now. And that was like an all king show. So I was like, wow, this is cool. Like I can express myself masculinely, and it's okay. Like it's a safe space, and we're able to impersonate male characters. So at first it's kind of nerve-wracking, because you're like on stage in front of everybody like I am right now. But the good thing is I can lip sync, so I can be like watermelon, 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 watermelon. And Jess over here is a live singer, so he can remember his lip. He almost beat me at the Mr. Trans pageant.
That was a close call.
Yeah, I think it was like a 0.3.
Literally less than a per point.
Yeah.
You're not bitter about that still, are you?
No, I don't think about it all the time. But he is still my king.
Yeah.
So he earned it. We fought a good fight.
Yes, it was tough. Yeah, it was fun. So that helped me, come out in the way I always wanted to express myself and physically be, and even appealing to others. So instead of, pre-transition, I would get called ma'am, or I would be passable physically. But as soon as they heard my voice, they're like, "Oh, I'm sorry. I mean, they're like, no. Sir is fine. Sir is perfectly fine. Please say sir." So I was in that character. I put on a fake beard, like I binded my chest, and I contoured it to look like more manly. It felt good to look in the mirror. I didn't want to take it off when I got home. So that's how I just kind of knew and confirmed with myself, like getting mistaken in the bathroom or saying, "Hey, you're supposed to be in the boy." Hey, I wish I could be right now, and now I can. So thankfully, transitioning has saved a lot of people's lives. It's really scary, at first, because you don't really understand it. And especially if you don't have resources growing up, which I'm thankful for the resources we have now, because we're able to reach out to others to get that help and support. But it was kind of scary at first. But back to the first drag show, I met a transgender person there who I didn't know was transgender. So I was like, hey, how do you do that? You know, I want to do that. And so he directed me in the area to go. And thankfully, we have Dr. Nicole now. Before that, it was Planned Parenthood, and that was like the only place that we can go. So we're thankful for Dr. Nicole now, and others who work with her as well to help our trans community. But just realizing that it was like possible and this was a real thing, because growing up I always wished for it, but I didn't know it was able to be done. And so now that I know, and now that I went through it, I feel like I can help other people. But I'm in a personal situation where I live my everyday life in stealth, so I don't necessarily like announce or promote that I'm transgender unless, of course, I'm in an educational panel or I'm working with the community where I feel safe. So like at work or in my daily life, like nobody knows. And sometimes it's scary to think about, but having kids is even scarier, because going through that journey, I have twins, and one of them is like more gender fluid. And so I feel like I'm able to help them, but it's scarier now because I need to help everybody else be aware of this reality. And it's not a choice, you know, everything that we have to try to explain to people and help them understand us. It's a work in progress, but I feel like we've come a long way, and I'm proud of the work that we've all done here, all of our organizations, and the fact that we can work together with that is even bigger. So stronger together, that's our theme for TDOR, Transgender Day of Remembrance this year. So hopefully everyone can make it out on the 18th at Fresno State, because it's our annual thing for trans emotion, and it is the tradition of the chair to host the show. So you'll be seeing more of me that night. But honestly, like, my journey is what got me here, and it was scary just being out there because I wanted to be passable and I didn't want anybody to know I was transgender. Not that I'm ashamed of it, but just because I worked so hard for this vision to be, and I didn't want anybody to know or mistake me. And when I finally got there, it was like, no, I want nobody else to know who didn't already know before. And, you know, but now I feel like it's more important to be that voice for other people, no matter how it made me feel. But now I feel different about it. Like, I'm definitely proud of it, and I can just share my experiences. So thank you for letting me do that.
Yeah, thank you for coming. Last but definitely not least, second runner up, missed by a 0.3. Jess, I'm going to ask you the same question. What has been your journey to becoming an activist and advocate for our trans, gender expansive community?
So, thank you for asking me to be here tonight, and getting to hear everyone's stories. I'm incredibly honored to be sharing the table with all of you here. I can say 2011 was the rock bottom on which I built my foundation. I had just come back into Fresno in 2011 after a short stint up in the Bay Area, because I had a thought, like a lot of folks who grew up in Clovis think, which is maybe it's better there. I'll find my people there. It won't be as hard. And it couldn't have been farther from the truth for me. And I experienced a level of trauma that I couldn't believe. So I came back really broken. I still didn't really know who I was. At the time, I thought I was a butch bisexual, and that was about as far as I got to understanding myself. And I had no prospects. I had no idea what I was going to do with my life. I only knew that I was tired of running, and I was going to start taking care of myself. And because of that, about a month later, I met the person who is now my husband of 11 years, Crow Fitzpatrick. And, you know, when I first met him, I didn't realize he was trans. And we got to talking about Disney and Broadway musicals, and when they told me that they were trans, I was like, I don't really know what that is. I had read Stonebush Blues before that, and that was a puzzle piece for me. All these little puzzle pieces I had all along the way, but I still didn't really understand it, or that was an option for me. And so they invited me to my first transgender support group in a tiny little building off of Van Ness just before Olive. It was like a closet, pretty much. And my understanding was that was the first year that trans support groups were being offered. So I got in that room and I heard my story from other people. And that was the last puzzle piece for me. And then for 2 years I panicked. I wasn't sure, you know, what that meant, what all the steps were, and how was I going to come out in Fresno when I already had a strained relationship with my family. I couldn't imagine coming out like that. But what happened was I got support from my friends first, and I started coming out to them, and I started getting support from community, from in particular the folks of Trans Emotion and folks like Blue Rigs, who acted as mentors and support systems. And I came out little by little. And every step of my transition journey was really frustrating because there were so few resources available. Everything was word of mouth. Everything was, well, I did my name and gender change last year, so I'm going to show you how to do it based off my old documentation and paperwork. Fundraising for paying for my testosterone, or doing odd end jobs in order to pay for the prescription every month, or people swapping their prescriptions with each other who got more than what they needed, and getting used chest binders in order to fit into clothes properly. All of that was people helping each other. Sort of a, not quite a joke of like, you know, being a part of the queer community is having one $20 bill that you pass on amongst yourselves. And that's what it was. And I realized, you know, and I was very naive too. Coming back and suddenly finding myself in this new community, I was thinking, well, we're all part of the LGBTQ plus in that acronym under the rainbow umbrella. So everyone's going to support each other. And that wasn't true at the time. Blue Rigs, as Andrew talked about, who was the founder of Trans Emotion, he went to different LGBT organizations to teach them about the T in the LGBT. And that was still actively happening. And that was part of what Trans Emotion kept going, as well as doing Transgender Day of Remembrance. And I remember being on and off, but every year there was a new thing that got me more activated in the community. So one, it was my own personal medical care. And then it was, you know, somebody got injured or attacked in the community, and there was a protest, or, you know, again, fundraising to help them, or providing shelter, giving people car rides. In, you know, 2013, with marriage equality being, you know, a positive thing. Oh, and 2012, I was still going and protesting at the clerk's office for marriage equality, you know, so being all a part of that. And 2014 and 15, more news and more names being added to the Transgender Day of Remembrance, and starting to recognize just how bad the situation was, not just here in, you know, Fresno, but all over the United States. And 2015 was what really pushed me in because of the death of Casey Haggard. She was a trans woman who had only been out for about 6 months before she was murdered on Blackstone. And we didn't hear, you know, Trans Emotion didn't hear about it for 3 months, and then it was on the news, and then there was a mockery of her death. And it took the leadership of Trans Emotion to bring signatures of showing that she had been going to support groups to say, no, she was in our community and she was targeted. And that really is what got me involved, really sunk me into it. Because if that could happen here, and it could happen to her, it could happen to me, and it could happen to anyone that I care about. And I didn't think it was right. So I became a lot more involved. And I'd already been volunteering for Trans Emotion for some time. And then I was asked to join the board. And I got to start participating in doing the planning for Trans Day of Remembrance, which was incredibly moving. And it's still something that's very important to me, recognizing those who did not have a voice in life and having their names heard and spoken is still incredibly important. But as being shoved sort of into this leadership role without any experience before, I had a lot to learn. And I got to learn the positive aspects of leadership and what it looks like when you have people who are organized and willing to do the work and who are doing it for the community. And I also saw the downsides. What personality instead of principles can do to an organization and a community when people are there for themselves rather for them. And I also got to learn how important it is to listen to the community, what they want. They didn't want just Transgender Day of Remembrance. It was important, but they were tired of mourning. They were tired of victimization. And so we not only started an art night, which was something that wasn't a support group, but something that people can come to get free art supplies and express themselves and take their art home with them. But we then put on Transgender Day of Visibility. And I know that there were TDOVs in the past, but we started it back up again because that's what people wanted. People wanted to celebrate who they were and that they were alive. Give them their roses while they're here. And it was exhausting because there is, you have 5 or 6 people on the board, and you might have a handful of volunteers that come up and down, but you're basically the ones doing everything. And with all of that, it got to a point, not only with the workload, but I also, I was still trying to find, full-time employment and taking care of myself and my partner. And in 2016, the Pulse shooting happened in Florida, literally a week before me and my partner were getting married. And I remember how tangible the sorrow and grief was for all of us in the community. but it really hit home that it was, you know, one, a Latin night with trans and drag female performers that night that this person chose to enact their violence on. And the trans community felt, at least here, that that part of it wasn't shared, and we were left out of that. And it was exhausting. And it was discouraging with all the work that we had done. It still felt like Fresno and some of the community weren't really participating, really wanting to get involved in helping the community. So I kept plugging along. 2018, though, I chose to step back because of my health, because I was getting ready finally to get my top surgery. And I also realized that I had a lot of unlearning to do about what leadership actually looks like. And I had to really assess what I wanted to be and who I wanted to be. And what I realized was, with the examples that I had, I didn't want to be that kind of leader. And I didn't want to be the person that burns themselves out without any recognition for themselves, without any care about themselves or the people around them, and without the opportunity for other people to pick it up, to learn. I had a lot, well, I guess the short of that is I had a lot of decolonizing to do in my mindset, and to recognize my white privilege in being put in a leadership position with no training. So I stepped back. And once I had my top surgery, it was like a reset button. I had a completely different view of who I was and what I could be. Everything felt, it was like taking my first real breath. And I wanted to take care of myself. And I also wanted to do what was right for the community as a whole without taking up all the oxygen in the room. So I worked on myself for a few years, and then 2019 and 2020 happened, and I was invited to come and interview for the space here, the community outreach specialist at the EOC LGBT Resource Center. And it has been an absolute joy for me. It's hard work, but there's a work-life balance here. I can work one-on-one with people who need it, and do, the outreach is just built right into it. And I can take care of myself, and I can take care of my family while serving the community. I know that's an incredibly privileged position to be in, and I take it very seriously. But I believe that this is the work that I was meant to do.
That's beautiful. Well, we are very happy that you are here. I'd like to go back to Xico. I would love for you to share, because I think I'm so happy that you're on this panel, because I think the work that you do really speaks to the intersections around exclusion as well as reclaiming for communities that are particularly oppressed, which are Indigenous, queer, Two-Spirit communities. And I would love for you to talk about your thoughts around healing and community growth and building for our communities, and to decolonize a lot of our queer spaces that are still very exclusionary.
Well, I want to commend you for being honest and say you're expressing your truth. So I think that's really important that we know our history, because a lot of young people don't really know that they're, within the LGBTQ, there is a lot of racism. And it's we live in this huge country that there's a lot of racism, a lot of injustice, and within the LGBT there is a lot of injustice too. And so we have to really learn from our mistakes and learn to be more sensitive. So during the AIDS epidemic, when my father died of AIDS, 1986, my father was one of the first cases in San Francisco. And at that time, I was like, I think it was like, gosh, I must have been 19 or 20. It was in my early 20s. So, everybody was dying in San Francisco from AIDS, and it became like the Castro, where everybody, all the LGBT, completely became a ghost town. And so what happened was that during that time, it's very important for young people to know their history, especially people of color. There was so many things that were so effed up in San Francisco. So many things, like everything was geared towards white men. All the services was geared for empower white men. And of course, that was the time of Elizabeth Taylor and Rock Hudson. So that people of color did not get any services. People of color, Latinos, there was no services in Spanish. There was no services at all. And so here I was as a queer single father with my daughters, living up in the hood, living up in San Francisco, trying to raise my daughters, going to the San Francisco AIDS Foundation, and I was really different because I had a daughter, and my daughter was diabetic. So all this stuff was raw. My father died of AIDS, 76 friends of mine died of AIDS, so I went to get help, and it was very limited. I was told to go to the support groups, and I walked into a room full of white men, and the only thing I heard was their crystal meth addict problems that they had, and their tricks, and their one-night stands, and their poppers, and their bathhouses. I just did not identify with none of that. I'm a person who eats beans, nopales, tortillas, and I just don't, get it. And so anyway, I ended up going to the harness point in San Francisco to get services for me and my daughter, who were people of color. And at that point, I began to see that injustice, because I saw that, the group that we went to, the support group, was all, heterosexuals who got the HIV, who had gotten, the AIDS. And I really connected with them. I really connected with their struggle. I really connected to how it is to be poor, how it is to go to the food bank, how it is to go to Food Not Bombs, how it is to go to the Tenderloin and go to that church that gives food out. I did all that. And I did it with my daughter. And it was a struggle. And we got kicked out. Many times we got kicked out because I had my daughter with me. I was queer, I was Latin, and they didn't have those kind of services. So that's where you begin to see the injustice of having some nightclubs there that they would ask people for 3 IDs to get in. If you were Mexican or black, if you went to the Midnight Sun, right there on the cash shop, they asked you to have the 3 IDs. But who in the hell has 3 IDs? And that's how they kept women away, and they kept people of color away. They didn't want us to be in those bars. So a lot of people started to be really active. This has to change, And so fast forward, I think that we really have to create a place with us to talk and have these hard conversations that we've not had about racism in our community, the injustice of inequality of many things. Some people get more health care than others, And so I think that the time is right for us to really start to connect with each other, talk about these issues that we put underneath the rug, and have the next generation. Have the next generation, so empower them. What can we do for the next generation, for the youth, the children that are not coming out so young, who want to be trans? What can we do for them? What can we do to create this rainbow, this true rainbow of equality for all people that are in our community? And I think for me, if I was to die, that would be my ultimate wish, that we create this unity. I was infected with HIV in 1989, and I'm one of the 1% of people in the world who has long-term survived. I've had every single symptom of the AIDS, almost died twice. And I was so lucky that I got my HIV services at a young age. But at that time, there was no services for and there was everybody who was dying was Latinos, people of color were dying because they simply did not have those access to those services. So I think, to answer your question, and I wanted to just really thank you for really being open. And we have these conversations, when we see racism with our queer people, point it out. Have the courage to say, hey, that's not cool. That's not cool to call people rice queens or being queens or, to have privileges. We have to have the courage, to also to take care of our trans people, to be able to say no trans should be murdered. No person should be able to be murdered in the LGBT community. None of us should be murdered, violated, assaulted. None of us. So we have to really create this kind of unity where we can protect each other and we can put each other in check when we are out of line. When we're getting services that other people are not getting services, But I think for me it's just a self-reflection and to try to really educate the young people. And I wanted to conclude that I really encourage queer people to get education. I know that I have two friends who are transgender who have gotten a PhD and who are, in very important roles in society because they chose to get education. They chose to get higher academic. So, the time has come for us to be those kind of people that we can encourage young people to pick up our baton. Because then what is our life existence if we don't create people who can carry on our torch? What are we here for? Just for our own selves, an empowerment, or to help people be empowered? So I just wanted for all of us to reflect that in this panel and to be able to really, say, hey, let's create this beautiful world for the next youth. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to just kind of ask another follow-up to you, Xico, and then I want to move to the other panelists about also creating space for your own community, just for your own community. Because I love you because of talking about the work that you've done in the land that you've created for healing, and just sort of where are your thoughts around creating space for and only for Indigenous communities?
Yeah, as for the late people who came late, I'm a Two-Spirit elder. I was actually had a ceremony that initiated me to become a Two-Spirit elder in Oakland, California. So when you become an elder in our community, that means that you can tell stories. That means you can sing. That means you can create unity. That means you can have a way of putting communities that are in pain together and never be biased, never judge other people. So I was given that opportunity, and so I created the Two-Spirit ceremony in Springville, California. So each year, we are in the 7th year that we've had this Two-Spirit ceremony for Indigenous people of color. And so it's a safe place that people can go there and connect to nature ethics, connect to the river, to connect to the stars. So you guys missed that. I'm sorry about that, but I wanted to just to let you know that. So this creation of this ceremony was based on a murder of a boy, Gabriel Fernandez, who was beaten to death by his parents because they thought he was gay. So for me, I think that growing up, I always feel so comfortable sometimes around heterosexual people. Like, how come they get to kiss and make out and we don't? Like, how come they get to hold hands and down the street and we don't? How come, it's like this privilege that they have, and I just felt so awkward, that I couldn't be myself, and I had to hide my identity, I had to hide my true self, And I think the greatest gift to your question is to know that you're worthy of respect. That's the first thing. You're worthy of respect. The second thing, the greatest gift you can give yourself is to be true to yourself. Who are you? And respect that, and honor that, and walk with dignity. This is who I am. I want to be Butch today. And today I want to be femme. Or today I want to be Two-Spirit. But I think it's so important to be able to raise our life condition, raise our awareness and to be really confident as who we are. And that is my prayer. That's my conviction that young people like you guys who are so treasures of the heart. For me, the young people are the treasures of the heart, and that's to be our model. That the young people are treasures of the heart, and that we cherish them, and we acknowledge them, and we give them the tools to be empowered, so they can make those choices, and they can carry your legacy, your legacy, your legacy, and your legacy, and my legacy. So thank you for that question.
Absolutely, thank you. I'd like to turn to Rosio, and as a Latina, as a woman of color, as well as advocating for trans communities, LGBT communities, how has it been for you to navigate that space and to create and to address gaps that might be there for particularly trans communities of color, but also trans women and women of color?
Okay.
I probably asked you a really big question.
Yes, very, very big one. It's very difficult. It's very difficult for me to navigate through the systems, even just to be recognized as a trans Latina, much less as a woman. I have been reached out. Well, I've reached out to different organizations that actually throw appreciation awards to women of color, to women, basically, in general. And I asked them point blank, do you recognize any trans women? And a lot of them come back with, no, we don't. And that, for me, yes, it's sad to know that these agencies like the Chamber of Commerce, the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, the Women's Alliance, they do not recognize trans women for their categories. And that's sad because we have a lot of purpose. We have a lot of value. We have a lot of contributions that we've done as a whole, yet we're not recognized. So there's still a lot of work for us to do. And sometimes it's hard, but you gotta just chisel away. And that's where I feel like my purpose is, to try to chisel away. And just like Xico was saying, make the path for the young ones, because, I'm already at the foot of my life. And I came to realization, I'm a trans Latina. Am I 49, 50? Who does that? Now they're younger and younger. So my contribution too is the Spectrum Center does our version of Drag Queen Story Hour, where much of the books we have acknowledge youth who are trans, who are queer, who are questioning. And we pick these books out that are encouraging, empowered, self-loving, to bring up their self-esteem, their self-awareness. Because once you get to my age and you're where you're, like my mom used to say, you already got one foot in the grave and the other one on the banana peel. You're on your way out. So if that's why I try as much as I can to break down these barriers, because I feel like they shouldn't have to have any barriers at this point in age that we live in have to be put up.
Thank you. I'd like to go to Andrew. What does allyship mean to you? And what does it mean to be a good ally?
Oh boy, that's a huge question. Being an ally to me, it starts with an open mind and an open heart. It's always about being from a position of empathy and trying to understand, and maybe something doesn't make sense to me, but that doesn't make it wrong per se. Like, it's my goal in life is to understand and to be understood in that regard. As far as things to do, would be stand up for friends when they're being misgendered, to becoming part of the community and helping out with any local organizations or starting them if they don't exist. getting involved with your local university. I love the university bubble, as a lot of people do. It's a great place where a lot of us discover ourselves and find ourselves. It was that way for me too. When I think about the trans community, I think about these are my friends. These are my peeps. I want to take care of them and be a part of. And I just always remember. I always connect back to a lot of the stories I've heard in person, but also just to that initial reading of that Feinberg book always comes back to me. That brutal pain, that something, just the day-to-day struggle of just living as trans. I like, it's something that I live in a world of privilege. I don't have to go through a lot of those things, and just trying to be really sensitive to that. I think a lot of it starts with awareness. It starts with here. It starts with here first. There are friends and there are internet resources for the more intellectual side of it, I suppose, but it should start from the heart. That's where it should start.
I love that sentiment. Zane, where do we need allyship the most, do you think? As a leader in our community, where do you see allyship needed?
The most.
Or it doesn't have to be the most. You don't have to qualify it, but you know what I mean.
I'm
Where?
definitely thinking like our community, of course, because I think a lot of people can get the LGBT mixed up in a way because they're all grouped together, but they mean different things. So there's the difference between the orientation, the identity, the expression. So I think it's really important for people to understand that. And within my work with like school districts, I think it's really important because to answer your question, it might be the most important because as most people on this panel said, the youth is our future. And I mentioned having kids. I mean, they started at a brand new school in kindergarten. They're in first grade now. So the school is a couple of years old, which is to our advantage because they want to be, perfect at everything. Like, what can we do? How can we support you? We're happy. This is brand new. Everybody's happy to be here. And it's a really good vibe. And we're really fortunate to be at that place because they're in the position where they want to help more. So I did, make sure that I had a meeting with like who I needed to meet with when my kids went there because I expressed that one of them is gender fluid and they need to understand that and they need to know how to be supportive. And if they don't know, then we can help them with that. And it is becoming more and more now to where it's just more kids are coming out and their parents as well. Like there's so many binary events at school. It's like donuts with dad and muffins with mom. So it's like, how can we have something in between, And so we're working on that still, and we have been like the past couple of years. And it really just hits home when your kids are in it. So it's like, now I really need to make sure this gets done. So working with the different districts has been great. Some of them are kind of set in their ways, but we're putting some pressure on them. So I would have to say that definitely in that line of education, I mean, all the way up to like universities. Like we've been doing presentations in college classes. So it's very, very important, I would have to say, in the education department.
Absolutely. Jess, I'm going to have you close the panel by asking you this. What are your hopes for the future in regards to resources, programs, initiatives here in Fresno for our trans and gender expansive community?
Well, my hope is that those who call themselves allies will stop just wearing pins and showing up for a party and actually getting educated and then putting that education into action in their workplaces, in the places that they're being educated, and in their families, and the places that they go every day. I'm sick to the teeth of ally in name only, and especially those who hold literally the keys to the treasury of where we can get our resources. And I have seen the work done by many of the people that are already in this room to pry the grip loose. And even within my own larger parent organization of EOC, where we are still having to teach our own programs about what it means to be fully inclusive, to fight poverty, there has been change. And it's because it's not just us little people pushing upward. We finally have leadership in the higher ups that also believe in the same thing. So that's my hope, is more leadership that will help us make that happen.
I share that hope. So I'd like to open it up. We ran a little bit over, but y'all were just so good talking, so it's your fault. But I would like to open it up for like one or two questions. So just feel free to raise your hand and address. Yes, I see you. I see you over there. Very eager to ask a question. I know this.
Should have brought a bigger paper to me notice.
Good. Go.
So my question, I want to touch on a couple of things going into this question. So Jess, you explicitly spoke about what I think of as the Trans Underground Road Program, the underground support that we have always as a community given to each other, and how we've leveraged that in our history to advance life for our own members. Historically, we seem to have kind of lost that kind of after the 2008 Marriage Act. We kind of lost a little bit of that, I think. And as we're seeing such a huge rise of legislation poised to hurt our community, to punish people who are helping us, to demoralize, demobilize, and demonize us, how do we get back to that? How do we get back to what Chase Strangio of the ACLU, who's fighting a lot of these battles at the legislative, the court circuits, especially in Arkansas, says we will love and protect one another. How do we take that in our history of a very self-sufficient isn't the term because we had to be self-sufficient, but a very self-supportive and very inclusive to our own community. How do we take our own community's support and mobilize that into the future, especially as Xico, you're speaking about with passing the torch to the kids that are out there today? So that's kind of part of what I wanted to ask, and I have many other questions, and I'll kind of rope one into it. The idea of transcestors and role models that we have, because many of us, I know I didn't have a role model. How do we take that and become that? How do we be that support within our own communities and pass that on? How do we rope that back in to support and protect one another? Where do we see that going? How can we do that?
Well, the first thing I'm going to say, what we need in this community, and I'm talking at the local level here, is trust. I have seen time and time again the most marginalized portions of our community get taken advantage of because they do not have a voice, they don't have financial support, they don't have legal, or they don't know that they have legal support. And people who talk a good game or promise the moon for a handshake and a picture suddenly disappear, and you never see or hear from them again, and suddenly you're also missing money from your coffers. We have to build trust, and you can't build trust unless there's action that people can see you doing. And the way to also build that action is by listening to the community and what they actually need. I know that, like, here at the center, we are providing support groups. We have a mental health group now for adults. We provide different, fun events throughout the month and the year, but we really lack in youth resources, for instance, and that's because we don't have a connection to that. We also have a huge blind spot in getting connected with the Black community, which is the most marginalized and victimized community when it comes to being a part of the trans and gender expansive community. And that's something that we have to work on. And we have to do the outreach. And again, we have to do the work to prove that they can trust us so they can come and use the resources that we can provide. It's not a simple answer, but that's what I think needs to happen.
If I may add, I think also it would be good to hold those people accountable that are, I think, just being able to have these hard conversations. Because I see when I came to this area, I saw a lot of people hold back what needs to be said. Is people have this fear. I feel like after Cesar Chavez, the whole movement, people became so stagnant on saying what needs to be said to the people who need to be said, holding lobbyists, holding political people who are hurting us, held them accountable, talking to them, and lastly, when in San Francisco there was some gay marriage going on. We have to stop singing to the choir. We have to go talk to the communities that are oppressing us and having these hard conversations, because Castro, when that whole thing was happening, it became like this huge carnival party. People were honking like to vote, for this gay marriage. But of course, it got overthrown. But the whole thing, what I'm trying to say, is that we queers need to go and have a conversation with those people that are oppressing us, and being able to create trust that way too. That one-on-one conversation with those people, and stop collectively going together and having a party, and not going to having those hard dialogues with people. And I think for me personally, we have to get to the point of having those people held accountable who are in politics, who are voting correctly, voting wisely, and taking that notion that we also can create change within the politicians.
So using our own humanity.
Mm-hmm.
And Rosio, I think you were ready to say something.
Yeah, I was going to say that it's very difficult to try to open up that dialogue with, and I'm just going to put the example out there because I tried myself with the African American community. I tried communicating with the NAACP chapter that's here in Fresno. I tried communicating with West Fresno Family Resource Center here in Fresno, and that's when my mom worked for them. I tried talking to the director, and all the answers were the same. It was a slam door in my face. They feel they do not have any LGBTQ people in their community. And if they do, they shun them. They just avoid the topic altogether. So when you've got one group that's willing to talk and try to reason and be respectful of their culture, but yet recognize that there are LGBT people there, it's kind of difficult when they have the shades over their own eyes.
Our religion plays a lot of role to that, unfortunately. Religion makes people feel guilt and shameful. So we also have to address, it's your religion, and in that nice, kind way that is not threatening to them, is to also look at that, because people, historically, slaves were made to see get raped in homosexual ways. And so they have this history of slavery, of not being able to open up about their homosexuality in their communities. And it's through the slave days that they were able to witness it. So they become very oppressive, very in denial about their own people who have homosexual tendencies or who need those services. It's a very sad, and I do feel it's complex, and it's more that I sees it. But I think creating that awareness and educating ourselves, where's the root cause of that? What is the root cause of this distrust that the African Americans do not have? And it comes from learning and understanding their pains and sorrow that goes back to slavery, and going, and being able to gain this trust and going to their communities. Because a lot of times we invite people to our communities. We have to go to their communities and hear their stories. And I think that's one way for me that, my daughters are Black. And, And I always go to their communities and I want to hear their stories. And that's how I ended up in that support group. I ended up in a support group in Hunters Point with all African American support group because I couldn't identify with the white folks. So I ended up going there and identify, and we just had so much fun. And it was a blast. But I just let my hair down in front of them, you know? So I think that community building with them is a good one.
And as you mentioned too, as you pointed out, and we're speaking to the elder generation. So like you said, they're in denial. And all they're hurting is the future generations, the young ones. So I don't know what we can do as a community to try to wedge that door at least a little bit open to get a listening ear in. Because I think just getting our toe through the door would be able to help. But it's kind of hard when you've got elders that want to just keep the things silent.
Allyship takes work, and it's awful work sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
We can have space for one more question. Drew, you clearly have more questions.
You're just dying.
I don't want to take up all the oxygen in the room. I even get one.
Or have the youth, maybe the youth have a question. I think that would be, something.
Not to put you up on. Well, how about we do this? How about we end the panel and we can talk, and there's plenty of food and all of that. I want to give a big round of applause and a heartfelt thanks to all of our panelists.